Hey, Cookies here. This is how you heal Mist of Tirna Scithe. We're going to go over all of the major mechanics that you need to be aware of as a healer for each individual mob, and just break down the whole dungeon from start to finish. So, starting off, we are going to skip this first pack, but I'm going to explain the important mobs as we walk by, because we won't be fighting them for the rest of the dungeon. So here we have the Drust Spiteclaws that we're going to be skipping, but a lot of the time if you are pugging keys, or even sometimes groups decide to push these, like in Season 1, everybody did these a lot of the time. Uh, what these guys are essentially going to do is very heavy AoE damage. They just leap to random targets and deal splash damage to everyone around them. So whenever you pull these, don't be afraid to use some healing cooldowns and some defensives and stuff. They hit a lot harder than they might seem. They seem like they're just a small group of little mobs because they have low HP and whatnot, but they can kill the group very fast. And they also, every time they leap, they apply a bleed to everybody that gets hit by that splash. So you want to kind of stay a little bit spread out. And then don't be afraid again to use healing cooldowns just to get through this part. Um, and then the only other mob that we're going to talk about is the Tirnenn Villagers right here that we're passing by. And the only thing that you need to be aware of that they do is while you're fighting them, they will cast Overgrowth on random players every now and then. And what it does is just some initial, it does like damage over the cast of their channel, like the time of their channel. And once their channel is finished, it's uninterruptible. You can't stop it in any way. Once the channel's finished, it stuns the player in this little seed, and you have to kill the seed in order to break the player out of it. But what we need to be aware of as healers is that initial channel that they do to get them in the seed. It does quite a bit of damage if you're not paying attention to them or spot healing them. So whoever it targets, you want to just make sure that you're healing them and keeping them topped up until the channel's finished. Okay, so going into this first pull, we have the Drust Harvesters, and this is going to be done with Arcaloth, so just bear in mind there's going to be a little bit of extra stuff going on here. But the Harvesters, there's two in this first pack right here, for instance. You'll fight more throughout the dungeon and whatnot. And what they do is they're just going to spam cast Spirit Bolt, which needs to be interrupted. If it doesn't get interrupted, it targets random players. Like you can see this one here on orange is targeting the rogue. So if that cast goes off, the rogue's going to hit for a very heavy amount of damage. It does like a lot of damage, especially on fortified weeks, so you want to be very cautious of that. Essentially, if the casts are going through, which you should be expecting if you're pugging and whatnot, then you need to just keep the group topped up and be ready to like whack-a-mole heal people when they take damage. And then the other cast they do is Harvest Essence, which is almost just as dangerous because it will do an AoE channel right here. It's a 6-second channel, and as long as it's not interrupted, they will heal themselves for a bunch of HP and deal damage to every single person in the group. So you want to interrupt this immediately. And as a healer, since obviously a lot of classes don't have interrupts besides Shaman, you can use like crowd control or knockbacks and all that kind of stuff to interrupt them. I would say if you only have limited crowd control, you want to be using it on the Harvest Essence, and then just hopefully people interrupt the Spirit Bolts. But as long as you keep people topped up, the Spirit Bolts shouldn't be too big of an issue. And that's like why I use something like Spirit Link here. Is like if any Spirit Bolts go through, we'll probably survive them and be fine because of things like Spirit Link, and you can use other healing cooldowns, or damage reduction is really valuable here. Cool. And then the other mob that we'll talk about, I'll rewind it a little bit, is the Soulcleavers. So those are the other guys that are in here, the Drust Soulcleavers. They will also do two important abilities. They do Soul Split, which you can see right there was on the tank. It's a little debuff that goes on the tank. And we just need to dispel it instantly. It just increases the damage that the tank takes, or whoever has the debuff. So right here, Soul Split, and it stacks twice. So I'm waiting for that second application. There it is. And then we can dispel it. And now the tank doesn't take increased damage. So you want to be dispelling that. And then on top of that, they also cast Hand of Thros, which will... I don't think it's actually a cast. It'll just be a buff that they get. It should be happening here in a moment. Let's see. It's kind of hard to tell with how they're standing, but I may not end up doing it. There it is. You can see it at the very end there. So they don't actually do a cast, but they do grow bigger in size, and they kind of get this like weird purple aura around them. You can see this one right here that my mouse is on. He'll change like at the last second, right about right about there. You can see him, he does like a little roar ability and he kind of turns all blue and gets bigger. And what that does is make them heal on their auto attacks. So you want to, that's when you want to use like stuns and crowd controls or slows and knockbacks to get them away from the tank to keep the Soulcleavers from healing themselves. So both the mobs have ways to heal themselves, and that's what we should mostly be focused on, is just not letting them heal. Cool. So next up we have the Drust Boughbreakers, which are right up here. Let's see, when do we end up doing the Boughbreakers? Oh, do we end up? Oh, we end up skipping the Boughbreakers. It looks like in this key. Let's see. So essentially, what the Boughbreakers do. Let me just double check that we skipped them. Yeah, okay, we did. So the Boughbreakers are just gonna do. The best advice I can give is keep the tank topped up because they do a lot of damage with their melee attacks, and then on top of that, the Boughbreakers, when they hit 50% HP, and the Boughbreakers are these like big guys. I guess I'll rewind it just so you can see them. When they hit 50% HP, they will do a thrash. It's just an uninterruptible thrash that does damage to everybody in the group unless you outrange it. And in order to outrange it, you have to be like extremely far away. So typically just use a healing cooldown or be ready to like heal up the group there when they're doing their thrash. And here's the Boughbreakers right here. We're going to pass by them. Of course, I have my window open, but they're just the two big guys here at the start of the boss. Okay, so next up we have the boss itself, so I'll just fast forward this a little bit. Okay, so this boss is actually very easy as a healer, as long as you understand when to heal and whatnot. So the first thing that I'll talk about is Death Shroud, which is what the boss does. It'll be Ingra Maloch that does it. It's right here. It's he'll actually cast Embrace Darkness, is what it'll be called. And it applies something called Death Shroud to him, and it just makes everybody in the group take ticking damage, like you can see here. So before he cast it, we're taking almost no damage. It's basically just the tank taking some auto attacks, but no one else in the group is really taking damage unless they get hit by these swirlies. And then the boss is going to cast Embrace Darkness right here, and now you can see everybody starts ticking down. Right now you can see the rogue ticking down, I'm ticking down, and there's the mage and the monk losing HP. It like starts doing rapid damage to everybody in the group. So that's when you want to plan healing CDs and be ready to like whack-a-mole heal, is while the Embrace Darkness is active. And that's just once the boss casts it, it lasts until you break this phase, which is when you get the tree down to 20% health. The other ability is Repulsive Visage, which is right here. The boss will just periodically cast a fear. You can Tremor Totem it, or if you're a Holy Paladin, you can run Concentration Aura, and there's also a Conduit that you can run that reduces the duration of fears on people. And you just want to, the main thing you want to be aware of with the fear is make sure everybody's full health in case any mistakes happen, like they get feared into these pools. And then also try to position yourself in a way to when the boss fears you and you run away from him, because you're always going to run like in a straight line away from him, that you don't get yourself feared into pools that are on the floor. Like there, you can see a step into kind of the open area and then get feared. So as long as you run backwards into an open area, you should be completely fine. And then as a healer, the last tip I'll give is when you do get the tree down to 20% and you're getting into this burn phase, no one's going to take damage anymore. And you would just want to do as much damage as you can to the boss here. Like here, you should only be casting damage spells, essentially. The only reason I healed is to get the proc off of the crit buff that you get from Arkaloth, the mini-boss that we killed earlier, but that's not going to be a thing anymore in 9.2. So that is pretty much this whole boss, is just healing. Here's the other Embrace Darkness, followed by a Fear. So this one's pretty deadly. Want to make sure you use some kind of healing cooldown. This is where I should be popping like Ascendance. There it is. I just popped it. And then we're just keeping the group nice and healthy. And that's really the whole fight, is just healing the Embrace Darkness. Alright, next up we have Solving the Maze, which I'm going to talk about before I talk about any of the trash in here. So the way, when this was explained to me, it was a little bit confusing until I started practicing it, and then I like started catching on to how it worked. I'm just going to explain to you guys my method of solving the maze as a healer. So if you want like just a specific example of like how to solve the maze generically or with the add-ons and stuff that you can use, you can find that elsewhere. Just look up Mist Maze Solving, help or something like that on YouTube or on Google. But I'm going to show you guys my method of solving the maze, and then we'll go from there. So my method of solving the maze is each of the, I'm going to go out of full screen for this one. Each of the, what is it? Each of like the pedestals here, the like wooden stumps, they will have these like runes on them essentially, or these little inscriptions. So like here, this one. Okay, so I'm going to write down, we have, these are the different like attributes that these can have, right? So we either have, it's either full or empty, it's either a leaf or a flower, and it's either has a circle around it or it has no circle around it. So those are like, these are all the attributes that could possibly be on these things. So as an example, this first one is a full flower with no circle, right? So we have a full flower with no circle. And now we're going to look at the next one. And this one is a, sorry if my keyboard's loud, empty leaf with a circle. So there. So now we compare these. We go full against empty, flower against leaf, no circle against circle. So these are polar opposites. They literally have no matching traits whatsoever, and they're complete opposites, which means, and I know this is going to sound confusing, but I'm going to keep explaining more, and hopefully it'll like start making sense as we go through the other doors, that this is the correct answer. So we go this way, because if you look at the first option, so when you enter the room, there is usually, when you enter the room here, there's usually going to be one pillar or one of these pedestals that are going to be right here by the entrance. You check that one, and if the next one that you check is a complete opposite match to that one that you just looked at, it's the answer. So that's the solution, is that door right there. And then again, I'll explain more as we go through of why that's the answer. That's just a example from this first room. So now we'll go into the second room, and I'll give an example of this one. So now we'll erase this. And remember, we're going to check this first one. Okay, we can see it right there. As we walked in, we saw it. Just rewind it a little bit, and there it is. So it is a full leaf with a circle. So now we're going to look at the second possible solution, which is a empty flower, no circle. And again, we found the exact same thing. They're complete opposites. They have zero matching traits whatsoever. So that means that this one is the answer. So I don't even need to go and check the other ones. This one's the answer. So I mark it. And now we'll move to the next room, and I'll just explain it again, because there is a way to solve it. If that first option isn't the one that you saw, then this is another way of doing it, which hopefully this next room allows us to do that. We will see. Let's see. It looks like we died here. Okay, so first one is a, I'll erase these again. It is a full leaf with no circle. All right. So now we go check the next door, and this is what I'm doing as a healer every time. I'm literally just solving these. Okay, perfect. So this one is not a complete opposite. So this one is a full leaf with a circle. So this means that they have two matching traits. They're both full, and they both are leaves. So now, because we found two matching traits, which this is the way that you solve it, is you try to find, if you don't get that initial one that I talked about in the first two examples, this is how else you find it, is you want to find two of the pillars that have matching traits, or two matching traits, I should say, not just matching traits. They need to have two matching traits exactly. So these are both full and they both are leaves. That's two traits that are matching. Cool? Okay. So now what we're going to do is find the exact opposite of these two matching traits. We don't care about circle or no circle anymore. All we care about is that the answer is going to be empty. Because these two are full, the answer is going to be empty, and it's going to be a flower. So that means we're looking for an empty flower. Whatever one is the empty flower is the one that's the answer. So there's an empty leaf with a circle. That's not correct, so I changed the marker to the next one. And I don't need to check this one because I already checked all the other doors. So this is the only one that could possibly be an empty leaf. Or an empty flower. Now I'm just actually making it confusing. But watch, you'll watch as we walk by over here that this one is going to be an empty flower. So we go over here, we kill this stuff, and now when we walk through, watch, this one will be an empty flower if someone walks close enough to it. Oh, now it's not going to show it because we already opened up the door. But you get the idea. Hopefully. We'll do one more example, and then we'll call it done with that one. So, and if it still doesn't make sense, you just kind of go in there and practice it, and it'll make sense. So the first door that we saw, let's rewind it just a little bit. When we walked in, is right there. That is a empty flower with no circle. Okay, so those are our 3 traits. Now we're going to walk over to this next one, and we have, and here we go again, we have a full flower with no circle. So we have 2 matching traits again. They're both flowers, and they both have no circle. These are our 2 matching traits. So now we're going to find one that has the opposite of these 2 traits, which is going to be a leaf instead of a flower, and it's going to have a circle instead of no circle. So we're just looking for a leaf with a circle. Whichever door has a leaf with a circle is the correct answer. This one is a leaf with a circle. This is the correct answer. It doesn't matter that it's empty. It doesn't matter if it's full. That's the right one because it has, it has 2 opposite traits to these ones that we found earlier. So that's all I'm going to do. I have already exhausted myself on explaining it, so hopefully it makes a little more sense, or you can go in there and practice it a little bit and then kind of come back and watch and review, and hopefully that helps. But that's how you solve the maze as quickly as possible. Without the help of add-ons and stuff. This is what I found that works best for me. Again, if it's not working for you, there's plenty of other resources out there to help you find a way to solve the maze yourself. But as a healer, it should be something that is a priority when you go in this dungeon, is you should be the person solving the maze while everyone else is killing the trash in the room, so that by the time that you're done, your group can move on to the next room. And that's why I always recommend hotkeying one of the markers, the world markers, so that you can mark which is the solution, just to let people know, or at least just be ready to run through the solution when they're done killing trash. Cool. All right, now let's actually get back to talking about the dungeon itself. So we have the first thing that we're going to talk about is actually pretty far in here. I think it's right about here. After this, we're going to talk about the Mistveil Stinger. So here it is right here. I believe it's marked with purple. No, that's actually a different mob that's marked with purple. Okay, so we have the Stinger, and what they're going to cast, the only thing that you need to be concerned about is the Anima Injection. When this casts, it's going to target a random player. You can see it's targeting me, and then the Stinger will dash to the player and apply this debuff to them, and they just need to be dispelled before this debuff expires. Preferably instantly that's definitely preferred, but as long as you dispel it before it completely expires, then you're good, because when it expires, it just blows up and pretty much kills the player and everybody around them. So there, the monk got it, and I dispelled it, or they diffused it, I couldn't really tell. It looks like I dispelled it, because my dispel is on cooldown now. So that is the Stinger. There's another Anima Injection, and we just dispel instantly again. The faster you are at dispelling, the less dangerous the ability is. And then the next mob that is also in this pack that we're going to talk about is the Mistveil Stalker. And the only thing that they do is Mistveil Bite. And you can see it actually go off quite a few times here because we aren't stopping it. So here it is right here. It's targeting the monk. And if this cast completes, then it will deal a huge amount of initial damage to the person it's targeting and then apply a bleed on them for the next 10 seconds. And the way you stop this is obviously you can't interrupt it. Same with the Anima Injection. You can only stun it or crowd control it in some way. But you can't use things like roots or knockbacks or anything like that. That won't work for the Stalker. The only thing that works is hard stunning it with an actual stun, or you can use things like paralysis as crowd control, or you could even use what's another class, like Hammer of Justice, if you're a Paladin. You can hibernate if you're a Druid, if you can time it properly, stuff like that. So there's the Mistveil Bite. It does a little bit of initial damage, and then it's going to have this bleed on the monk for the next 11 seconds. And the bleed hits very, very hard, so it's something that you want to be aware of. You can see how much damage it's doing right there, just as an example. And then here's another example. It's going to do another bite, which I think also goes off. There it goes on the rogue, and does a huge amount of initial damage, and now he's going to be bleeding out, and we have to heal him. So if the bites are going off, be prepared to heal them, and also be aware of how you can stop them if you can. But typically it's going to be like melee DPS or melee classes in general that are going to stop it. And there I got targeted. I could have pressed the defensive and probably lived. But again, that's why we want to be interrupting them, is because they hurt so badly. And then the last mob that's important in here is the Mistveil Shaper. Is there one in here? Let's see. There is a Shaper in here. So it is marked with orange. And what the Mistveil Shaper will do, this is actually only technically important if you have a Purge. So if you're playing a Shaman, Priest, or a Blood Elf. The Mistveil Shaper will cast Bramblethorn. We'll see when it casts. There it is right there. It gets interrupted. But if that cast right there does not get interrupted, it will apply a buff to one of the mobs, just a random mob in the pack, and it needs to be dispelled. Otherwise, after a couple seconds, it will apply a debuff to everybody in the group, like in your party, that will do a ton of damage and root you in place, and it's actually completely awful. So you want to make sure that that is either being interrupted or purged. That's the two options. So there it's casting. Here we're going to see it. Let me rewind it just a tiny bit back to there. So here the Shaper is going to cast. There's a new Shaper that walks in. It's Moon. And it's the old one that's casting, it looks like. So there's the Bramblethorn. And watch when the cast finishes. You'll see an icon pop up. There's the icon. It's on the Tender. And so I need to target the Tender and purge it instantly. Like, I need to purge this very, very quickly. And it's not actually until it times out. You don't have that long. You only have, it gives like a small absorb shield to whoever this buff is on. And if that absorb shield breaks from your own group's damage, then that's when it pops and does damage to everybody in the group. So we purge that. And there's another one casting. We'll see if this one goes off. There it is. It's on the Guardian. So I immediately target the Guardian. There you can see the absorb shield. If this absorb breaks, we all pretty much die. So we're purging again. There we go. We got rid of the buff. So that's your two options of dealing with that, is you either need to purge that buff or you need to interrupt it in the first place. And that is it for the trash inside the maze as far as healer stuff goes. So now we'll move over to the boss. I guess the first mechanic we'll go over is freeze tag, which the boss is going to spawn a little fox ad on a random player. It could be in melee, it could be in range, and it fixates a random person. Here it goes right here. It's spawning by the mage. It fixates a random person, but the best way of dealing with it is just crowd controlling it, because if it gets to the person, it'll just keep running at them. But it is CCable and slowable and all that stuff. But if it does reach the player, or if anyone touches it, even if it's not the fixated player, it will explode and do a little bit of damage and then freeze everybody for like 8 seconds, or it'll freeze everyone around its location, which is very, very bad in combination with the other abilities here. Okay, and then the other thing that I want to talk about as a healer is this right here, the guessing game. So this is where you have to solve like the maze puzzle essentially, but during the boss fight. As a healer, it is not your job to solve this. It is your job to keep the group alive, because this is when your group is going to actually be taking damage, is during these guessing games. You take quite a bit of damage until the guessing game is finished, and you still have Vulpin spawning and everything. So my advice is plan a big healing CD for every single guessing game phase, which there will usually be 3 in every single fight. So plan 3 big healing CDs, or 1 big healing CD for every single guessing game phase here, because you can see how much damage we're taking here, and this is because I didn't press really any healing CDs whatsoever during that. So that is pretty much how you deal with the boss. And here's like another guessing game just for an example. We're going into the guessing game right about, it looks like we ended up skipping that one. There we go. And see how much damage we're taking again. And this is where I should be popping, there it is, Ascendance, right as I was about to call it. And then we're just keeping the group nice and healthy, because if any mistakes are made during this, people will die. So that's why if you keep them healthy, you can still allow room for mistakes to happen if people get hit by like the Vulpin, or if people accidentally stand in something, like the dodgeballs and stuff, like all that. So it's very, very important to keep the group healthy. All right, so next up we have a couple of these mobs. There's only like 2 that are important, which is as far as healers go, which is the Spinemaw Acidgullet, which you can see right here. What they're going to do is just apply debuffs to random players. We'll probably see it here in a second. There it is. One's on the rogue right now. You can't dispel this in any way. It's not any kind of damage. It's just like it's basically a physical debuff. And it will just do damage to the player and anyone like within. You can see this little green circle around the rogue right now on the floor. It does damage to the person it's on, so the rogue, and everybody inside this circle. So you kind of have to stay spread out from each other, try not to stack up too tight, and then heal the players who are affected by this debuff. And it can, I believe, stack. It'll show like multiple icons if you're using something like LVI here. At least that's how it shows up for me. So like there it goes on the mage, so now I need to be paying attention to the mage. And then the other mobs that we're going to talk about are these Reavers here, which get pulled here in a second. So here they go. When these get pulled, basically what is going to happen is they are going to jump to random players and apply something called Debilitating Poison. You can see it right there. There's 2 stacks on the mage, and look how much damage he takes within that small frame of a second. So they jump to him. Here they go. Jump, hit. 1 tick of the poison, 2 stacks of the poison does that much damage. It is extremely deadly. You can dispel it with poison dispels, so that's paladins, druids, monks, and I believe that's it. I think those are the only classes that can dispel it as far as I remember. So you want to be dispelling that on cooldown as much as possible, especially if somebody gets multiple stacks. If somebody has 2 or more stacks, they are in big, big danger. But if you don't have a poison dispel, like me right now, my Shaman, you just need to keep those players alive. There, I got a stack, and the rogue got a stack, but it looks like the rogue got dispelled by the monk. I have this stack, so I need to be healing myself. There, the tank has 2, so you get the idea. Heal the poison debuffs, and be cautious of the Reavers, because they are very dangerous. Cool, so that's all the trash over here that's important to talk about. Now we're going to talk about the boss. So I will fast forward it till we get to the boss. Alrighty. So the first thing I'm going to explain is how to move on this boss. So the boss's primary ability is going to be Acid Expulsion, and it's where these little green swirlies spawn, and you just need to obviously move out of the way and not get hit by it. But when the ability next happens, it's going to spawn 2 swirlies now instead of 1. And the second swirly will go to wherever you stopped moving from the last dodge. So like right here, I dodge right here, and then watch the next time the boss does this ability. So I'll just fast forward it a very small amount. And when it does the ability again, it's going to spawn 2 circles instead on me. And one of them is going to like lean over this direction. Do you see that? And the more you move, the further and faster that circle travels, making it harder and harder to dodge or more likely to hit other people. So as you can see, what I'm doing here is moving a very, very small amount. I'm moving as little as I possibly can. Just as an example, we have this first circle here. That's where it started. I drop my second circle just right there. I drop my third circle right there. And then the next one, same thing. You just want to be like moving. You just want to be inching as close as you possibly can while still dodging it. Because the more you move, the more hectic the fight becomes in a shorter amount of time. So try to stay very close to the swirly, but not in it, obviously. And then just pick a different dodge location each time, like dodge a different direction every time it spawns. So that's how you control that ability very well. The next thing is Mind Link. So Mind Link is going to pick a random player. We'll see when it happens here. It should be happening relatively soon, I think. Let's see. Yeah, there it was. So there's Mind Link. It's targeting the mage. You can see who it's targeting ahead of time. And basically, it's going to hit that player and everyone around that player. And until they all separate from that one player, like everyone is linked to that one player that it targeted. And everyone has to like snap or get far enough away from that one player. But the mage blinked away, so we're all safe. But generally, the idea for positioning with that ability so that you don't have to react like this right here, this is terrible. So this, we get a Mind Link, and the, I believe it's the monk. I can't tell who it was. Let's see. So here goes the next Mind Link. It's on the monk, and he's literally in the middle of every single person in the group. The mage is over here, I'm right here, tank's right here, rogue is over here, and the monk is just like dead center. So the way that you prevent this from happening, because now we're going to take a ton of unnecessary damage just because of the bad Mind Link, is you pre-position in a way where you're spread out. Like I'm spread out from the mage, And right now it seems good. Like I'm spread out from the monk, I'm spread out from the rogue. So if the mind link targets me, we are completely safe and it's not even gonna like link to them because we're too far away already. But the monk comes in, and basically what needs to happen is when you see that you are targeted by the mind link right here, as soon as the monk is standing here seeing that the mind link is targeting him, he should be full sprinting away from the boss right now, like getting as far away as possible, because that's how you be proactive about it, is like, say I was targeted right now, before this cast is even finished, I'm literally gone. I'm running all the way over here into the corner of the room and hiding until the cast finishes, because then I'm not dealing with the mind link in the first place. It's like I'm already too far away to link to anybody else. So that's how you deal with mind link. And then the other ability that the boss does is going to be consumption, which happens here at 70% HP and at 40% HP is when the two consumptions happen. The consumption's interruptible after you break the shield on the boss, which is a very small amount. It should be interrupted right away in most cases. And it just does, all you need to know is that just everybody in the group is going to be taking unavoidable AoE damage, and there's going to be these giant swirlies on the floor that you have to dodge. So this is probably the best time to use stuff like healer cooldowns, or just be ready to AoE heal a lot during the consumption until it gets interrupted, because it can be potentially dangerous, especially if someone accidentally gets hit by one of those swirlies and they're not full HP, then they're probably going to die. And then the last ability that we're going to talk about is coming up here in a minute. It is called Accelerated Incubation. It's right here. It's uninterruptible, can't stop it in any way. And it's going to spawn these little ads who are going to fixate on a random player. Here they fixate the rogue. And they'll all run in from different angles. And then once, generally, even if you're ranged, you want to group them up towards the boss. So like if I got fixated here, I would run towards melee, kind of get close to the boss, and then I would use something to crowd control or stun them or slow them. I would use like Earthbind Totem or my Capacitator Totem to stop them in place, because then people who are hitting the boss also get to hit the ads and kill them, because it's important that we get rid of them as fast as possible. And then when they do die, they drop little puddles on the floor, so if you're in melee with them, hitting them or stunning them or doing anything like that, when they die, be aware, because see how they die and the little puddles grow on the floor? If you're standing in that, you can just like take a bunch of your health and damage unnecessarily, and it can kind of be a surprise and you won't really notice until you're probably already dead. So be cautious of that, and then you deal with the consumptions, and you dodge the swirlies on the floor while keeping it under control. And that's pretty much the whole boss fight. So hopefully this video was helpful for Mr. Tirna Scithe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.